I'd ask you to open to Ruth chapter 3. We've been working our way through Ruth, and this morning, even though it's Mother's Day, we're still working our way through the book of Ruth, but I've decided to title the sermon, Are You My Redeemer? Thinking of the famous children's book, Are You My Mother? If we remember that story correctly, there's a little bird that goes around, and everything he sees, he asks, Are you my mother? Trying to figure out who he is, who his mother is, and it goes through quite a long list of things. It turns out that the steam shovel is not his mother. Well, we have a similar thing going on for us. A story in Ruth chapter 3 that is maybe not quite as simple to understand as the story, Are You My Mother? It's a little bit more of a challenge, but there is just as important, in fact, a more important question that comes out of this story. Are you my Redeemer? So I'm going to read through Ruth chapter 3, but I'm not going to read all the way through the whole thing. We're going to go kind of piece by piece. We're going to look at this as this story is unfolding. And so we're going to read the first 5 verses together and then ask a question. So follow along while I read the first 5 verses. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, All that you say I will do. Let's pause the reading there, and let's start to consider what is going on in this story. And the first point that I want us to see, the first question really that I want us to ask is, what were they thinking? What is going on in this story? Go to the threshing floor at night, uncover his feet, and lay down and see what happens. What is going on? Well, part of what is going on is Naomi is trying to provide rest for Ruth. We have been talking about Naomi, and throughout this story, Naomi has been somewhat of a negative character until we saw her last week give praise to God for God's faithfulness, and we start to see this change in her as she goes from thinking that the Lord is against her to actually following the Lord. And Naomi has a plan. She wants to provide rest for Ruth. This is something that she has been trying to do all along. Back in chapter 1, when she first decides to return to Bethlehem, she tells her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, to return home to their own families so that they can find rest in a new husband. Now, she says, I'm going to find rest for you with a husband here in Bethlehem. She has this plan of getting Ruth to have a future and to be taken care of. She makes these connections of all along, everything that Boaz has been doing, and she says, I think Boaz is the right man for you. She couldn't see how Ruth would have rest before, but now that she sees how the Lord has been working through Boaz, she sees that Boaz, their potential redeemer, can give Ruth the rest that Naomi herself has longed for but has never had. And so she comes up with this plan to get her rest, to get her noticed by Boaz. She points out how nice Boaz has been. He has taken care of them. He has given them protection. He's given Ruth a group of women to work with so that she's not alone. He's given her extra food by providing not just the barley harvest, but also the wheat harvest. He has taken great care of her. And so she says, here's the plan. Here's the plan. And in verse 3, she says, Wash, anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go. What is she asking her to do? There's different ways that these words can be translated or taken, but pretty much it's all pretty simple. It's all pretty straightforward. Take a bath, anoint yourself with something that smells good, and put on your cloak and go out and meet Boaz. This is probably not what many modern interpreters are thinking that this is. A lot of them would say that this is something that a woman would do before her wedding or before her wedding night. That this is the kind of thing that she would do, and that there is an expectation that something is going to happen on this wedding night. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think actually there is a better understanding of this that comes to us from 2 Samuel. In 2 Samuel, which is a little bit after the book of Ruth in our Bibles, but in 2 Samuel chapter 12, there's a story of King David who has been watching over his infant son who is sick and is close to death. And eventually David's child dies. And after his child dies, in verse 20, we read this. Then David arose from the earth, and he washed and anointed himself and changed his clothes and went to the house of the Lord and worshipped. I think the connection that is here, this wash, anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, I think the connection here is actually to a time of mourning. What would Ruth be mourning? The death of her husband. How long should a widow mourn for her husband? Well, the answer probably depends on the relationship. Ruth appears to have been in mourning this whole time. Is probably part of the reason why the good and righteous Boaz has not made any steps to court her, to make her his wife, because she's a widow in mourning. I think that's what's going on here. I think that Naomi is telling Ruth, the time for your mourning as a widow is over. Wash, anoint yourself, put on your cloak, and then go. In the same way David does later on. And as her time of mourning comes to an end, she should do this, and she should go to Boaz, and she should make it very clear what her intentions are. There is apparently a time of harvest where there's too much wheat to keep all inside. It has to be kept outside, and so the men would stay outside with their harvest. This is not a normal practice, but maybe once a year or so, this would be something that they would have to do. And so Naomi says, she knows that tonight is the night that Boaz will be doing this and will be sleeping outside in the threshing floor. And so Ruth should go, and once he is asleep, she should go and uncover his feet and lie down. And this is where things start to get a little bit maybe weird in our minds. And it's where many modern commentators have started to go, I think, a little bit astray. They have started to take this and they've started to say there is something overly sensual going on here. There is something that is problematic happening here. What do you mean she's going to lift up this man's robe? It seems that this practice is something similar to what went on in Genesis chapter 38 and the sheep shearing that we hear about with Judah. That when they went up for the sheep shearing, there was a great party. And at the end of that, or during that, the men would be eating and drinking. They would be happy. They would be maybe not quite in their right state of mind. And so what often accompanied that was prostitution. That's a problematic practice for the people of Israel. But it was a big celebration, and sometimes the common line that maybe people would think is, boys will be boys. This is just something that will happen. This is not something that should just happen. This is not something that pleases God, but it was something that did happen. And so what is Naomi thinking? What is she thinking when she tells Ruth to go like those prostitutes would go and uncover him and lay down? I think the suspense is meant to be here. What is Naomi thinking? What is Ruth thinking when she says, all that you say I will do? What are they going to do? How are they going to accomplish this? Is this Naomi telling her daughter-in-law to go and to get this redemption that she's looking for by doing what's right in her own eyes, by taking it with her own hands? Something that it seems her and her husband did in chapter 1. They did what was right in their own eyes. But what is Ruth thinking? Is she fine with this suggestion? Is she just being obedient even though she's terrified of what might happen? What is going on? What are they thinking in doing this, in putting themselves in this position? Well, the story continues in verse 6. So she, that is Ruth, she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. And at midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. Ruth goes, and she puts herself in this potentially compromising situation. She does everything that Naomi expected, and she does this, and she comes to Boaz, and she does all of these things, and as they're getting ready, as they're thinking about what's going on here, she uncovers his feet, she rolls his robe up, she lays down, and she waits to see what his reaction is going to be. She waits to see what his reaction is. What would we expect? What would we expect of a man who has eaten and drunk to his heart's fill? He is merry so that he falls asleep, and he wakes up, and there's a woman lying there. What is he going to do? Well, the answer, if Boaz is righteous, is that he's going to say, what's going on? This isn't how things are supposed to happen. If he is unrighteous, he's probably going to take advantage of the situation and take advantage of Ruth. Well, Boaz at least starts off in verse 9 the right way. He says, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Ruth does not stay silent like Naomi told her. She doesn't wait for Boaz to tell her what to do. She actually answers his question, and she tells him what she is looking for. She is looking for him to cover her with his wings and be her redeemer. Ruth recognizes that she is in need. She recognizes that she has a great need. She needs a redeemer. She's been in this compromising situation, and she needs someone to redeem her life, to redeem her worth, her value in that society, someone to redeem her family because she has no children. And what she says is she tells Boaz to cover her with his wings. I think that when she says this, she's letting on that she knows what she needs and what she's really doing there. I think she's referencing Boaz's own words from chapter 2, verse 12. In chapter 2, verse 12, Boaz said, "The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward will be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth is putting this same thought back at him. She has come to take refuge under the wings of the Lord, and now she comes to Boaz and she says, "Spread your wings over me and be my redeemer." See, if you're reading this story, thinking about Ruth the way that we've gotten to here in the Bible so far, you might start to think that she's going to act like a typical Moabite. Like in Numbers chapter 25, verse 1, where the daughters of Moab come and tempt the Israelites away to follow after them. Maybe she's going to be another one of these typical Moabites. But she's not. She's not going to act like that. She doesn't need to take the promises of God into her own hands either. She doesn't need to take God's promises into her own hands because of the failure of the son of promise, like Tamar and Judah that I referenced from Genesis 38. She doesn't need to act desperately like her ancestor, the eldest daughter of Lot, who took advantage of the wine that her father had drunk too much of in Genesis 19 and got pregnant by her own father. By the way, her son's name was Moab. Is Ruth going to be like all of those other characters mentioned in the Bible so far? Is she going to act in this inappropriate way? Is she going to reach out and do something sinful in order to try to get a blessing herself? By all of these historical accounts in Israel's own scriptures and history, with what Naomi tells Ruth to do and what Ruth did in going to this man who had been made merry with wine and uncovering his legs and lying down near him, it makes the reader think, she's just a typical Moabite, out to get what she wants, no matter how wrong it is. But Ruth is not a typical Moabite, and Boaz is not a typical Israelite who goes off into sin. Ruth is seeking refuge. She is seeking rest. She is seeking redemption. And even though this language so far is charged, and it makes us think that the same old story is coming, there is this sudden twist with her words. Ruth is seeking refuge, rest, and redemption. She does not reach out to take it by doing what is right in her own eyes. She does it by placing her trust in her Redeemer, Boaz. If you're interested in doing a deep dive into this, I have two commentaries that I would recommend to you. The first is Daniel Block's commentary on Ruth. I think he does an excellent job of dealing with what's going on here. And the other one is by Ian Duguid. They both do a wonderful job of talking about how the language here is meant to lead us to think that something unsavory is about to happen, but that nothing unsavory did actually happen. So I would recommend those commentaries if you want to go deeper. But the point that the story is making is that Ruth is not seizing her own idea of safety by doing something that is evil. She is placing her trust in her Redeemer and waiting to see what he will do. Now, even as I say that, which those are the words that are here on the page in front of us, but as I say those words, does that story sound familiar? I hope it does, because that's the same thing that every Christian has done. It is the same thing that we still call people to do today. I know what the history looks like. I know what people say about this new generation. I know what everyone is looking for. Everyone is looking for something to satisfy their deepest longings. Why do we think that there are such problems in our world? It is not because people don't care about anything. It is because we care so deeply about being loved, about being accepted, protected, and cared for, and so we will do whatever it takes to feel some measure of security and love. It's because we are desperate for rest, for peace in our lives and in our souls. But the answer that we need is not to do what's right in our own eyes. What we really need is the same thing that Ruth needed. We need a refuge. We need rest and redemption given to us by someone else. That is what Ruth was thinking. That is what Ruth needed. And it's what we need. We need a Redeemer to be our refuge and our rest. So that's what Ruth asks for. But what is Boaz's response? How is he going to handle himself in all that is going on? Well, he responds first by pronouncing a blessing from the Lord. In verse 10, he says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all that you ask." he responds by giving this blessing from the Lord. He recognizes that she is acting with integrity. He recognizes that she is following the Lord. She is acting in faith, not in self-service. And so he says she is to be blessed by the Lord because she has followed her heart and her faith, primarily her faith in him as Redeemer. And she has not gone after just what she desires in a younger man or a more handsome man or a richer man. But she has come to him out of faith that he is the best Redeemer for her. And so he's going to act in integrity and in love. He's not going to do anything sinful or hurtful to Ruth this night. She can be calm. She can be at peace. She does not need to fear. He will do everything that she is asking for. But he goes on. He says, "It is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the garment that you are wearing, hold it out." So she held it out, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. And then she went into the city. The way that Boaz acts here is as a man of great integrity. Not only does she not have anything to fear, but he's also going to take care of her. He tells her to go back to sleep. He's not going to do anything to her. She goes back to sleep, but he also gets her up in the morning before anybody could see her and charge her with sin. He doesn't want anyone thinking that she has done something wrong, even though she hasn't. He doesn't even want people thinking that. So he gets her up before light. And not only that, but he says, okay, you've got to have something to go home with. And he gives her 6 measures of barley. I was reading somewhere, this is probably likely close to 80 pounds of barley. That's a lot. That's a lot. She evidently carries it all home, just wrapped up in her shirt. That's pretty impressive. But he gives her more than what she needs. He takes care of her, and he sends her on her way with food and with love. And he tells her that he will do all that he can. He is willing to redeem Ruth. But there's a problem. He is willing, but he is weak. He can't do it. I will be a redeemer, but there is one nearer than I. I can't do it on my own. There is a redeemer nearer than I. The statement that he makes here, where he says, "It's true that I am a redeemer, yet there is one nearer than I," it reminded me of another Bible verse. I'm not entirely sure why, but after I studied it, I think there's a connection here. But it reminded me of a question that is asked in the New Testament. In Luke chapter 7, verse 19, is a question that is asked by John the Baptist when he is in prison. And he sends 2 of his own disciples to the Lord, saying, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" Boaz is willing to be a redeemer, but he says, but there's another one that's nearer. There's another one that actually has a better opportunity to do this. Another one who would be a better redeemer. And so it reminded me of that question that John the Baptist asked. Is it really you? Are you the one who is to come? Or should we look for another? See, Boaz does not have the right or the authority to make Ruth his bride. No matter how much he wants to, no matter how willing he is to redeem her, he cannot. He is not allowed to, and he is not able to. So this is why it reminded me of that question that was asked. Because we could ask the same question here. Is it really you, or is there another one that I have to go to? In Ruth 3, we are left on this cliffhanger. This is kind of where we are left. Naomi goes on to say, don't worry, he's a faithful man. He will not rest, and he'll settle the matter today. But the point is that we are left at the end of chapter 3 without knowing if Boaz is going to be able to redeem Ruth. She told him what she needs. He said he's willing, but he's not able to do it on his own. He's not going to let the matter rest, but he has no authority to marry Ruth or to make her his wife. And so if you've been listening to me preach for a while, you might know where I'm about to go next, and that's okay. Isn't it great? Isn't it wonderful that even though we start in the same position as Ruth, people who are in need of refuge, rest, and redemption, we don't end where Ruth ends in this chapter. The Redeemer that we are looking for, our refuge, our eternal rest, comes from one who is not only willing, but is also able. It's part of the reason why we sang that new song these last 2 weeks. We can always run to Jesus, Jesus strong and kind. Is he the one, or is there another? Acts 4:12 says there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. There is no other. Matthew chapter 28, before Jesus gives the Great Commission, he says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Or we could look in Philippians. Philippians chapter 2, one of my favorite paragraphs in the whole Bible. In Philippians 2, starting in verse 6, Paul says this, Christ Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. The Redeemer that we have is the Lord of all, the one who has all authority, the one who has all glory, and is able to do all things. So he is able to make the church his bride. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 through 32 talk about this. And I'm not going to read that whole passage, but we often read it at weddings because it's about husbands loving their wives. But the point that he makes there is because this is how Christ loves the church. Christ loves us as his bride. He redeems us with all the willingness and authority that Boaz did not have. Our Redeemer is willing and able to save to the uttermost those who come to him. Jesus is our strong Redeemer, not just willing, but also able. When this story starts, Naomi and Ruth are looking for rest and redemption from their physical difficulties. And Ruth goes and asks Boaz to cover her with his wings so that he can provide all that she needs. There is a truth that we need to be sure we understand and apply in our own lives, even as we look to Christ. And it is this: there is no person in this world who will be able to provide all that you need. If you are single and looking for someone to be that, they will never be able to cover you and provide everything that you need. If you are married and you look at your spouse and you say, how come you don't give me everything that I need? You don't fulfill every longing of my heart. The answer is because no person can. If you're a child and you go, this doesn't seem to apply to me at all. There is no parent, there is no teacher, there is no future spouse that will ever be able to give you everything that you need. There is only one who can give you all that you need and hope for. And it is Jesus Christ. Your desires may change as you get to know him better, as you realize all that he is providing for you, but do not wrap up everything, all of your longings, all of your hope, all of your desire for rest, for redemption, all of your hope in this life, and give it to one person, because they will fail and they will not be able to satisfy you. No matter how willing they are not strong enough. They do not have the authority to give you all things in life, except for Jesus. So if you are looking to other people for your rest or for your refuge, or if you're even trying to earn your own redemption, it will never work out. Gaining these things in the truest way, in the way that will matter in your soul and in your life, it is only by the work of Jesus Christ, not by our own efforts or by that one person that we have fixed everything on. There is rest in Jesus, our Redeemer. There is refuge under the shadow of his wings as he spreads his arms for us on the cross. That is where there is freedom and hope and a future in the steadfast love of our Redeemer. Stop trying to make your own refuge, to provide your own rest, to earn your own redemption, or to pin all your hopes on another person. But come to Jesus. Jesus, strong and kind, and his steadfast love will provide all you need in this life and in the life to come.